Hello everyone, this is a big compilation of all the Let's Not Meet stories I've done in my first year of YouTube. And did you know that nearly 100% of the people that listen to my videos are not subscribed. So if you could do me a giant favor and make your boy happy, click that subscribe button. It's free and you can always unsubscribe, but I don't think you'll want to. There will be a lot of content in the future. Thank you so much for listening, and now on to the stories. Several years ago, when I was 25 at the time, I lived with one of my best friends. Our friendship eventually started to dwindle, so she was rarely home. This night, however, she ended up staying at our place, heading to bed early. I was a server at the time, so I stayed up pretty late, usually watching YouTube and just smoking pot. This night was no different than any other, except for the fact my neighbors tried to kidnap me. I'll go ahead and give you some background info on my house and my neighbors. We lived in a 3-bedroom house with 2 bedrooms and the kitchen facing the crazy neighbors. They were a younger couple living in a smaller mill house. They were consistently coming over to our door asking for handouts. Now, normally I'd be happy to help a neighbor out, but they would come over and ask for crazy stuff, like for us to fill up an old Mountain Dew bottle with water because theirs got shut off. They asked for beer and once literally asked for $1. They would consistently be knocking at our door to ask for help, and when we wouldn't answer, I'd peek through the window to see them either jacking cigarette butts from the ashtray or pressing their eyeballs against the door peephole to see if they could spot us. Anyway, there I was smoking some weed and watching YouTube on my couch when I heard a knock at the door. I rolled my eyes because I knew exactly who was knocking. It was about 11 p.m. I checked the peephole and sure enough, the boyfriend who was on the porch. Normally I'd just walk away and continue with my life, but he looked like he was in distress. So I opened the door to see what was up. Hey, I just wanted to come over here and see if you would film my engagement. I got my girlfriend a ring here in my pocket and I need you to follow me. I need you to follow me to my backyard and film it for me. Baffled and curious, I told him congrats and I said I'd be out in a second. I just needed to put some shoes on. I shut the door behind me and locked it. Quickly, I ran into the back of my room and looked out into their backyard. I peeked through the blinds to see the setup. Nothing. Pitch black darkness. No sign of decorations or anything like that. Naturally, I woke up my roommate and I told her what was going on. "Oh, yeah, screw that," she said to me, and we both walked back up to the door after the boyfriend started banging on the door. I looked through the peephole again. I couldn't see anything and I was confused all the way up until he pulled his eyeball away from the peephole. I quickly turned around and put my back up against the door. My roommate came running back to the door with her room manning 2 wires for protection. We both clung onto the hangers and sat up against the door until he finally left. We were so freaked out, but we wanted to make sure we weren't overreacting. We went out to our back door and hopped into her car so we could do a drive-by. Slowly, we crept by in her car and peered into their living room. Sitting on the couch and staring at the wall, they looked strung out, was the couple and an older man. We sped off and ended up staying at a friend's house that night. I never answered the door for either of them ever again. One day I came home from work and an older lady was parked out in their driveway. She walked up to me as I got out of my car and asked if I knew who the neighbors were. I told her I hadn't seen them for a while and she informed me that she was the owner. She told me they were months late on rent and came to evict them. She entered the home to find it completely trashed. Needles and garbage everywhere, holes in the walls, and literal poop on the floor. I told her I was sorry to hear that and that she had to deal with all of it. But I was just happy they were finally gone. I'm not 100% sure what was going on that night, but I'm glad I didn't follow him into the backyard. Let's go back about 3 years ago when I had just moved onto a new state for college and didn't really know anyone. Unfortunately, I, at the time, was using one of those swipe left, swipe right dating apps, and I had just moved into the city and had to end a relationship due to the move. I was mostly trying to distract myself and got a sense of what people were like down here. I began talking to a guy, let's call him Steven. We were going to the same school that I was studied. We were going to the same school that I was. I began talking to this guy, let's call him Steven. He was going to the same school that I was, and he studied in the same department coincidentally. I guess I let my guard down because I assumed he was very dry since we were both kind of nerds with chemistry and physics. Because of that, the extent of what he was able to get was my Snapchat. It never really blossomed more than a couple of snaps every few days. Cut to a little over a month later, I had just gotten out of class and I got a snap from Steven asking if I was busy. I said no, I'm leaving campus and I was going to go head home to finish whatever I needed to do. He asks if I may do him a huge favor because he had to run out of town for work and had to drive about 4 hours south. On Snapchat, I was actually able to see his location and he really was heading into that direction. So, there was nothing wrong yet. Let me just say that from this point on, I tend to have someone send me their username because at the point I'd be able to tell rather quickly if it was a brand new account or not, which would usually throw out some red flags if the account was brand new. But I didn't do that this time. He wanted me to go over to his place and feed his dog and let him out because he wouldn't be home much later, if not until the next day. I had never been to his place and I vaguely knew that he had a dog. I hesitated and Steven must have followed up with something convincing because I ended up saying, okay, but only because there's a dog. He sends me the address and even though I have already been living there for a month, I really didn't venture out of the campus, bars, and even the area right around my apartment. The address is downtown and I had only been to the bars downtown where the surrounding apartments were very nice. So yeah, around his area it was really nice and I didn't think anything of it. I had just so happened to have been talking to a guy and they were in the area that day. I told Steven that I would be there in a few hours for the dog. The guy that I had also been talking to, we'll call him Brad, met up with me and we hung out for a little bit and I told him I had to go run and do a favor, but he can come if he wants, and he did decide to come. I got to the house and it is in a horrible area of town. The car was relatively new and I was actually scared to leave it parked. I get up to the house and there is a dog chained up to the front banister, barking and snapping at us. I tried to call Steven and ask him what was going on with the house and is this the dog I'm caring for or is there another dog? He said that currently he was in a meeting so he couldn't talk, but he said no, the dog is inside and he's in a crate in one of the bedrooms. Just walk to the left from the guard dog and go inside. We walk in and it is an absolute mess. Like a trap house really. There's a mattress on the floor, stained, dirty clothes on piles everywhere, but less like a hoarder and more like he was homeless. There were cockroaches in the kitchen. The house seemed to be falling apart in one of the rooms. The furniture was mostly ripped up, completely stained, and just disgusting. Brad was kind of a neat freak, so I could feel his desire to get out of the house. So I quickly texted Steven saying we found the dog and we will let him out, but where are the bowls so I can give him food and water? He says just go into the kitchen and they're next to the sink. I should have noticed that no one really lived in this house because it was uninhabitable unless You were squatting and homeless. There weren't any dog bowls anywhere, so I just ended up grabbing regular dishes and I filled one with water. Now, because I didn't really think too much of what happened, so my memory is spotty. I don't remember what triggered Steven to have to contact somebody else to come help me with something in the house. Either way, how I could unlock the back door to let the dog out or find dry food to give him. Either way, I asked him a question and he responded by saying, "Oh, hold on, let me get my friend that lives across the street to come and help you." Now, Brad and I looked at each other and wondered why he would have someone across the street he already knows. If there's someone across the street, why am I even here? When he mentions that he's right nearby, we walk up to the front of the house and see him leaving a front yard down the street. This guy is about 6 foot tall with blood dreads down to his shoulders. This guy is about 6 foot with blonde dreads down to his shoulders. For whatever reason, he ended up standing at the threshold of the front door and answered my question from there. I was starting to get agitated because I felt like I was wasting my time coming here. So I really didn't give a crap about what this guy did or how unhelpful he decided to be. This guy seems to be annoyed, but it was a pretty hot day and it looked like he had been working outside. But apparently he had been staring Brad down hard. I texted Steven that we just left and the dog is in the back of the crate. As we left the house, I kept looking in my rearview mirror and I saw the big blonde guy walking in a different direction from where he came from originally. On the way back home, Brad and I were mostly talking about how horrible the house was for the dog to live in. I didn't really tell the truth about how well I knew the guy to Brad, so he assumed that we had been friends for some time and that I could have trusted him. I didn't really know how to explain that I had casually spoke to him, but nothing more, and that he hit a soft spot when he mentioned the dog and needed help. I am quite literally the person who gets lured into a van with a sign that says "free puppy" on it. When I got home that day, I deleted him off of Snapchat and that was that. A couple of weeks later, I came clean to Brad and about how weird the situation really was. Thinking back on it, I had my set of keys in my hand and he had a pocket knife. Plus, he was very well versed in a couple of areas in MMA. But honestly, we were just considering how the guy had shown up from across the street. Could he have had a gun? Then it dawned on us that if he had actually decided to stay where he was and I went alone, I probably wouldn't have came home. Before this happened, I had been living in New Orleans for almost 10 years, lived in okay areas, quote, scary parts of town, and even one of the seediest motels that is frightfully operational to this day. That place begs for a novel of its own. But this story isn't about being a girl in a sketchy area of a very violent and depressing city. It's about how one night my coworker and myself did what we always did after working the same shift at our club on Bourbon Street. We split a cab from the line that waits outside one of the hotels on Canal Street after having breakfast at IHOP. One of the places that you would probably end up if you ever spent a drunken night in the quarter, whether you remember it or not. Dancers and cabbies in NOLA have a very good relationship. They watch out for us, let us tell them our weird stories at night, and we tip them very well since most of us know each other and they just shoo us home for the cheaps with the meter off. This time, my friend, I'll call her Jenna, and I ended up in a car with a female driver. It's uncommon, but it happens. We tell her where we're going and first we're gonna drop off Jenna. To which the driver replies angrily to put the address in her phone. We reiterate the directions, and since she's being so aggressive, Jenny just does it. The phone confirms what we said and she starts driving. The taxer in NOLA do not do this, by the way. So that's red flag number 1. Red flag 2 when she starts driving in the opposite direction, ignoring us saying and yelling at her that she's going the wrong way. It's when we look at her cabbie license on the seat and see that it not only is this woman not the man pictured, but she's taking us to the interstate to go God knows where. We realize that something terrifying is happening, and we start screaming to let us out as we reach for the handles while stopped at a stoplight. Suddenly they go click. Maybe they were unlocked or already locked before this, but she clicked it. It was not responding until we said we were calling the cops, and Jenna was fake giving our location with the cab details to the police. The woman swerved into the Chevron lot right before the overpass, and then she let us out. Our frazzled selves threw a 10 into the car. We were scared and didn't want to antagonize this person any further before they sped off. Then we went to sit at a bus stop before Jenna called a cab directly, and I just got on the damn bus in a frenzy, spewing my story to the driver while shaking. Human trafficking is a huge and real problem in NOLA for tourists and residents, adults and children. There are news stories you can find easily, and even more you've never heard about publicly. We don't know where this woman was taking us, to who, or what her intentions were, but they didn't seem good. Dolled up with a club makeup makes us look younger than our 30s, paired up with casual sweats most of us throw on at the end of the night. Jenna's a blonde, me a pregnant brunette. That's a good haul for a night's work. The thing that scares me the most is that we were talking about the pregnancy when we first got in the cab, and that actually might be the reason. As people who are very familiar with the area, the people, and the general working of this city, it was clear that we were in huge trouble. To top it off, we both knew we were victims of cruel acts that ended up in them not being around us anymore. These things happen, but in a cab after 12 hours of being in heels, we were on alert. We just wanted to go home. To the lady driving someone else's cab in NOLA, please, let's never meet again. I had blocked this story from my memory until my girlfriend reminded me of it a couple days ago. I started dating my girlfriend at the end of my senior year, and before we started dating, I used multiple dating apps. In many of my dating app profiles, I had my Snapchat listed so people could add me. This is important. Nothing led to anything with the dating apps. I talked to people for a bit, and eventually the conversations would die out. When I began dating my girlfriend, I had deleted the apps, but never deleted my account, meaning people could still see my profile and my Snapchat in it. I realized this after a few people would add me, but it didn't go anywhere because I'd tell them that I had a girlfriend. As you would imagine, the conversation would usually end there, but there was this one guy that added me. Let's call him Adam, and he asked me if I was available. Being straight, I was used to guys adding me, so I gave him the usual response. Sorry, I have a girlfriend, and I'm straight. I expected him to leave me alone, but he didn't. At first, the messages were normal. How was your day? What did you do today? Simple stuff like that. Being the nice guy I am, I responded. I thought this guy just wanted to be friends, and having a gay friend is okay with me. Then the messages progressively got more creepy. He started asking a lot about my girlfriend, and not the basic questions. Questions like, do you guys have sex a lot? Does she like that you're good in bed? I only simply responded with, those are kind of personal questions, and I don't feel like it's right for me to share my dating business. Adam would always apologize and not talk to me for a few days. Then he would hit me up again and ask creepy questions again. I eventually told my girlfriend about the situation, and for those who don't know, my girlfriend is super sweet, but she's also very aggressively protective over me. So she adds this guy and basically tells him that he needs to leave me alone. Unfortunately, this enraged Adam, who responded with, saying really, really awful things to her. Naturally, I defended my girlfriend and blocked Adam. Everything was cool for like a week until another account added me. This guy's name was Tyler, and he was super chill. He was super nice to me and respected my relationship with my girlfriend. As the days go by, I start to notice that Tyler's vocabulary was very similar to Adam's. I wasn't sure about it, so I didn't make any assumptions that it was him. So I gave Tyler's snap to my girlfriend, who adds him to investigate. As soon as she adds Tyler's snap, Tyler flips out on her, which confirmed that it was Adam. As soon as this realization was made, I blocked him again. From there, everything goes quiet from Adam for about a month. So I live in the suburbs of Chicago, and both my girlfriend and I live down the street from each other. So naturally, we do see each other a lot, and both of our families are really good friends. On top of that, our families would also house sit or even pet sit for each other. Anyway, a month goes by until I get a letter with no name or address on it, just my name on the front. I open it, and to my shock and horror, it's basically a love letter from Adam. The premise of the letter was basically saying that he loves me and he wants me to run off with him. The letter also takes a very sexual turn halfway through, with him describing what he wants me to do with him and him to do to me. At this point, two horrifying realizations hit me. One is that he knows my address, and two, he dropped that letter off himself, meaning that he is in my town. I immediately call my girlfriend, who is equally as shocked as I am, and after consulting with my parents, we decided to call the police. Unfortunately, since I had blocked as well as removed Adam's social media information, and that the letter had no return address, there was nothing we could do about it. Days after days, letters would keep appearing in my mailbox until they also started appearing in my girlfriend's mailbox as well. Her letters were far worse than mine. Adam wrote of how much he hated her and how he wanted to hurt her. He also stated many times many of the ways that he would inflict pain onto her until she broke up with me. Like me, she took this to the police, and again, they couldn't do anything. My girlfriend's family had plans to go to Hawaii for vacation, and I was to house sit for them. The first days went fine, until one of the last nights of the week. As per usual, I was over at their house, watching TV on the couch, when the power went out. Mind you, it was around 1 a.m., and it was pitch black when those lights went out. The next few seconds were silent when I heard a window smash from the office. To understand this more, let me give you a layout of the house. When you entered into the front door, to your left was the living room. Straight ahead was both the kitchen and the stairs, and to the right was the office and the dining room. On the upstairs level, as soon as you reached the top of the stairs, a bathroom was straight ahead, and my girlfriend's room was on the right, and the other bedrooms were on the left. Immediately, I shot up and grabbed a kitchen knife and ran upstairs and hid while I called the cops. I quickly got into my girlfriend's room and slipped into the closet. As soon as I was able to contact the operator, I heard the pounding of the intruder running up the steps. Thankfully, I had relayed all the information to the officer in time, who then stayed on the phone as we both remained quiet. The intruder took a left when he reached the top of the stairs, which gave me more time for the cops to arrive, and for me to get ready just in case I needed to defend myself. A few minutes go by and I heard the intruder start walking towards my girlfriend's room. In the only few precious seconds I had, I slipped out of the closet and positioned myself next to the door. As soon as he opened the door and started to enter the room, I took the kitchen knife and drove it into his shoulder. A young man screamed in pain as I heard a heavy metallic object make a large thud as it hit the ground. From there, I bolted out of the house where I met my 4 squad cars and cops with their guns raised. I threw my hands up shouting that he was upstairs in the right room. A few minutes go by and the intruder was dragged out, still screaming in pain. When the siren lights flooded the street, I got a glimpse of his face. And I was informed later by an officer that the metallic thud was made by him dropping a handgun. Adam was from Texas and had traveled up to my state to be with me. He had rented a room at a local motel and would put letters in both my girlfriend's and my mailbox daily. He would do this in the early hours in the morning, which was confirmed by the security footage of the motel he was staying at. That night, Adam had plans to kill my girlfriend and her family, just so I would choose to be with him. He managed to pry open the power box to the switch and switch off the power to her house along with the neighboring houses. He broke in with the intent of her being there. Well, unfortunately for him, she was enjoying a tropical vacation. To be honest, I have no idea how this outcome would be different if they did not go on vacation. And I am grateful that I still have my girlfriend as well as her family alive. So please, Adam, stay away from my girlfriend and me. So, for a little background here, I played the drums for 11 years of my life and I've gotten pretty decent at marching percussion and playing the drum set. I'm currently a college student who obviously needs money, so I took up 2 jobs that had to do with teaching drumming to kids. The first job, which I only recently left because of the pandemic, was an amazing opportunity at a school district to be a part-time music teacher. I honestly loved the job. This story has to do with the other music job, which I took up as a non-profit. That, I don't want to name for legal reasons, that resides in my town. So, at this nonprofit, there are 2 main coordinators in charge who happen to be an older married couple. The husband was in charge of the science and art side of the facility, while his wife, Bernice, was in charge of the music side of the facility. So she was in all aspects, my boss and also one of the piano teachers. I taught drum sets with a high school friend of mine named Jay. There was a guitar teacher who I was also friends with named Ray, and an elderly piano teacher named Mari. So that was the entire music department at the facility. I started the job when their last drum teacher suddenly left to pursue his dream career in the Bay Area. Bernice really needed me to start immediately, so I did. But during my interview, she had been very nice and cordial, but I sometimes noticed how rude she was to the other employees. Most of the other people working in the science side were merely high school students, and one of them may forget a small thing like forgetting to put a screwdriver back where it belonged, and she would degrade them. Degrade them. She would say things like, "How will you keep a job if you can't do simple things like this? Are you even using your brain? I should fire you for this kind of incompetency, but I won't because I'm a nice person." Nice person. Okay. I would see this kind of stuff go down, but I would never say anything because honestly, I just didn't think it was my business, and I didn't want to get yelled at either. I was also briefly explained that she also revealed that she was very religious and homophobic, and I was very obviously not straight. I tried to ignore these outbursts, but they started to get to me. I would try to talk to those kids afterward and reassure them that they could only do their best, and that should be good enough. A few months into the job, I even tried to talk to her about it, and that was a huge mistake. I said that maybe she shouldn't be so hard on them since they were just kids. She had been cheerful and smiling, but once I finished that sentence, She got quiet, her expression went blank, and her eyes turned cold. If looks could kill, I'm pretty sure I would be very dead. After a few seconds of silence, she suddenly yelled, "Mind your business. Those ungrateful brats need to learn their place, and so do you." I was absolutely stunned. I had no words. I had never been yelled at like that by any boss in any of my jobs, so it just really shook me. I just sat there with what I'm guessing was a shocked look. She then immediately went back to smiling and simply said, "I think you have a lesson with little Timmy in 5 minutes, don't you? Better get ready for it." She said it with a freaking smile on her face. Like, what the hell? I just got up and got ready for my next lesson. After that, I began to get yelled at by her pretty much every week for the smallest thing. Maybe if I finished a lesson a minute early or I forgot to fill in my timesheet right away. I endured months of this until I finally had enough. I lasted a year and a half until I finally quit. She encouraged me to call or text anytime, which seemed so odd, considering she had just yelled at me every day for the last week I worked. I thanked her so much for the opportunity she gave me and left without incident. Or, at least I thought it was without incident. Before I left my position, I recommended to a parent to have their kid get lessons from a friend of mine because her son was an absolute musical prodigy who needed more intense training to grow as a musician. She thanked me and I connected them, and he is still going to get lessons with my friend. And I get occasional videos of his process, and I'm just so proud of him. He's only 10 and he can outplay me easily on the drum set. Pretty impressive. However, the mother of the student accidentally told Bernice the reason why her son was leaving to the non-profit and said that I had recommended it. That happened in the middle of January 2020. By the end of January, my email inbox had been flooded with emails from Bernice. They ranged from her needing me to come back to sign a form to obviously being mad about recommending the student leave the nonprofit. Every day, there were at least 10 emails, and on bad days, there were upwards of 30. I blocked her email 2 weeks because I knew it just wasn't going to stop, and I finally had some relief. Then I noticed she tried to friend me on Facebook and then followed me on Instagram. When I blocked those again, it was her husband's accounts that tried. I then blocked those as well. She tried it again and used the non-profit's social media pages to follow me. I had no idea why she was being so persistent, and I didn't know what to do. It seemed to calm down, so I thought she gave up a few weeks later. But I had random accounts trying to follow me on all my social media. I asked my friends that I had worked with if they could see her doing this while she was in the office. So Jay and Ray went to the office and she had a lesson and looked to her monitor, and there were a bunch of tabs open. She sent snaps of what they found, and all these tabs were different faceless accounts on Facebook and Instagram that had been attempting to follow me. They closed them all out and they feigned ignorance and said that they had been looking for sheet music and the tabs had accidentally closed by themselves. They said she looked super pissed, but then suddenly asked them if they had me on social media, and they just said they didn't know and tried to walk out. But before they could walk out, she asked them if they could tell her what lies I had told them, and they said she didn't know what she was talking about. She got even more pissed and yelled at them to stop acting stupid and to tell the truth, and they again told her I never said anything about her or the nonprofit. She suddenly went on a whole tangent about how I was going to steal all the students and the nonprofit would have to be shut down. From here, she never spoke to them again about it. But after this, I did notice I started to see her whenever I went to Walmart in town or to get groceries and such. I'm telling you, 8 out of 10 times I would go, she would be there. She never spoke a word to me, but she always just kind of lurked. One day, my younger sister said Bernice spoke to her while she was at the McDonald's inside the Walmart and she went after school to grab some food with friends. Luckily, my sister knew who she was and she knew not to give any information to her when she asked if she was my sister and how I was doing. My sister ignored her. My sister kindly said that she didn't know who she was and she didn't feel comfortable talking to her, and then proceeded to ignore her. Bernice just smiled and then left my sister, but my sister called me shortly afterwards to ask to be picked up from the Walmart because she rightfully felt super uncomfortable. I sped over from my college and got there within 15 minutes, and she ran out and got in my car and we sped off. As soon as I left the parking lot, I could see Bernice's car had pulled out of a parking space and was following us. I knew it was her car because I had seen it every time I went to work, and it had a logo for the nonprofits on the side of it, so it was hard to miss. I realized that she had been waiting in that parking space to either follow my sister back to the school, or in this case, follow me who had picked her up. I drive a bright red Honda Civic, so it's pretty easy to see even from a distance. So I knew I had to lose this crazy lady because I had no idea what her intentions were. So I decided to get on some of the side streets and drive all kinds of random ways through our town, and then I even got on the highway that takes you to the closest major city, and then got off a random country road. It was insane because this woman was so persistent as hell. She caught up and kept up with me until I got to the highway. Once I got on, I was easily doing 80 to 90 and weaving in and out of traffic to lose her, and eventually I did. I then parked in between some orchards off one of the country roads I took. My sister had been on the phone with our mom the entire time, who then proceeded to let our own police know. We got on the phone with them and they told us to drive to the police station, and there would be someone waiting to help us. So I made my way back to town while consistently checking my mirrors for Bernice. We made it and I gave a statement, and they made a report and then asked me to describe the car. I said it was a burgundy SUV with a nonprofit's logo on the side. They said it should be easy to find, and they went straight to the nonprofit to find her. Sadly, Bernice had an alibi waiting when they got there. She showed them the security footage of the front of the facility, and the burgundy SUV with the logo had been sitting in its spot since she opened, so there was no way she could have followed me, according to the police. They said there was nothing they could do and it was left at that, but I knew what I had seen. It was messing with my mind for days until I finally got my answer on how the hell she even pulled off that stunt. Jay informed me 2 weeks later that Bernice had announced that they had bought an identical SUV with the logo and everything for the nonprofit. I was stunned. It was the same make, same model, same color of the SUV. Even the license plates were almost identical, only having two differences differ from the original SUV's plate. Bernice had played the cops into thinking I just had an overactive imagination. She knew exactly what she was doing. I was just so confused at this point. Eventually, I emailed her and told her to stay away from my family because I was never going to talk to her again, and clarified that I had no intention of taking any students from her. Hell, I'm not even a goddamn music major, so why would I even want to continue doing anything music oriented? Her reply was almost instantaneous. Sounds good, dear. You take care now, and be sure to tell your sister that I said hi. Bernice, I really hope we never meet again. When I was 12 years old, I got an unusual opportunity. I was able to be involved in a study abroad program where I would live in England for several months. The program was run through my middle school, and I went over to England with a group of around 15 other 12-year-olds. Before we went to the homes we would be living in for the next few months, We ended up staying in London for about a week to do some sightseeing. When we got there, we were staying in a small hostel downtown, and my school had essentially rented out the entire hostel for the kids and for the adults that were chaperoning the trip. If I remember correctly, there were 2 adults with us. Every day we would have a scheduled activity, and then we would have a significant amount of free time where we were allowed to explore the city as a group with just the kids and no adults. The second day we were there, my friends and I were out together, and we ended up stopping to look at some kiosks that had souvenirs. We were about a block from our hostel. I was around the backside of the kiosk. It looked like I was alone, and I feel someone grab my arm. I turn around to see a middle-aged man, most likely homeless. He looks to me and says, "Hello there, pretty little girl," in the creepiest voice I had ever heard. I immediately darted around the other side of the kiosk and back to my friends. Before I could even tell them what happened, he came around and got super close to me and said, "You can run, you can hide, but I will find you." And then he walked away. I immediately grabbed my friend and started pulling her back towards the direction of the hostel. I was crying, and we got back there and told our chaperones what happened. They essentially just brushed it off and didn't do a thing. Every day we were in London from when on, I would see him through one to three times a day when we were out. He would never get close and never say anything, and he would always be smiling while watching me. Every time I would see him, I would point him out to either one of the chaperones or another kid in our group. On the last day we were there, we were getting ready to leave, and we were catching a train from London to Leeds. While we were waiting at the train platform, I hear, "Bye, little girl. I will see you soon." And I turned around, and sure enough, he is there. He quickly leaves, and again, no one in my group really does anything, except for the other kids, because they were all completely freaked out. I never saw him again after seeing him on the train platform, but I still remember his voice. Every time I think of it, I get a shiver down my spine, and I think about how close to danger I was. So to the man that stalked me, let's not meet. So, I used to work as a personal trainer at a very familiar gym in my city to help pay for college. The neighborhood this gym was located has 2 other gyms across the street, so we could have a lot of clients changing from place to place. I worked the night shift since I was out of class around 6 p.m. and I worked from 6:30 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. Usually a lot of guys would go for experimental classes at night, and I was known for working with the quote bodybuilders. At around 9 p.m., this huge guy with a very arrogant posture walked in for an experimental class. The secretary immediately sent him to me, and I was more than happy to help him out, although I was pretty sure he already worked out and needed no help whatsoever. Weird, but okay. Throughout the whole hour, this guy would ask me very personal questions. Where do you live? Are you single? What's your shoe size? Etc. And as I was working, I just politely tried to keep our conversation focused on training and exercising and stuff. When the class was over, he looked at me and said, "Can I have your number?" "I'm sorry, but I have a fiance." "Are you sure? I usually don't take no as an answer." Yes, I am here just to help you exercise properly. Nothing else. Then this guy just puts his finger at my face and goes, "When I get my gun, you won't say no to me." And then he just walked out of the door. For almost a month, I needed to ask a male coworker to go with me to the parking lot late at night because this guy would be at the corner waiting for me to get out. He would stare at me and smile, waiting for me to leave. Later, I found out he was at the gym across the street and took my car's license plate. I had to ask one of my clients that was a cop to scare him out. Until this day, I can't get his smiling face out of my head. To the creepy, most likely roided up guy that was threatening me at the gym, let's not meet. Creeps by the Beach, a saga. Background: these all took place outside my home at the time, which was on the literal last block of a major city, right across the street from the beach. The building was framed on four sides by the beach, the woods, a construction site, and a few other sleepy houses, as well as a muni line. Think the subway but above ground. It's the very last stop on the muni, so unless you catch it at the right time of day or at the height of tourist season, the area is basically empty on all the sidewalks. The house itself has an initial patio door, which doesn't always fully close if you don't slam it, and then an entry area with a staircase leading up to the second locked door that leads to the apartment. Experience 1. I get home from work one day at about 9 p.m. and I immediately get into a small spat with my roommates. After about 30 minutes, I decided to leave the house to cool off. I had planned on sitting on the porch outside, but as I looked across the street at the ocean, I decided it would be more peaceful there. I had never been to the beach at night for safety, but as I looked at the well-lit parking lot and no one in sight, I decided it would be alright. In the 1 block span from the beach to my home, there was a little wooded path that started on my street and dumped you out at the crosswalk for the beach. It also intersected with another pathway that took you down to the coast. Everything was fine, and after a while I started the 1-minute walk back on the little path. All of a sudden, I look up and see a man walking briskly on the intersection path, looking right at me. I speed up a bit and try to ignore him, and as we hit the section where the two paths intersect, I end up being about a foot away from him. He calls out to me, "Hey, I want to talk to you." I ignore him, and after a few more steps, he reaches out his hand and grabs a part of my hair, saying, "Hey, come here." I immediately yank my hair out of his hand and book it to the last block, sprinting to my house, and I can hear him running behind me. I turn the corner sharply and I am briefly out of his sight. Luckily, the initial area way to the patio had been left by accident, and I run through the door and slam it shut. I hear his footsteps stop outside, followed by silence. As I go upstairs and look through the front of our window, I see him walking away into the construction site. Experience 2. I had a friend that lived a couple blocks from where I was, along the same stretch of beach. After hanging out one day, I decided to head back home around sunset. I've walked this routine many times, and it's just barely light outside still. Only a 5-minute walk, so I figure I'll be home before dark. As I cross the intersection from their house, I notice a white van parked on the corner that is not usually there, covering a little garden I like to look at on my way back. I can just barely make out 2 people in the front seat. I think, odd, okay, whatever, and then pull out my pepper spray, just in case. I cross the street passing the van and now have my back to it. As soon as my foot hits the pavement on the other side of the street, I hear the van start up. I turn my head just slightly and I see them illegally turning onto the street where I am now walking. They creep the van beside me slowly, just behind me, within my peripheral vision. I decide to stop and let them pass. I pause and pretend to be looking at my phone and see them stop driving immediately. This was a nope from me and I broke into a run, the van following me to a small vintage motel about one building away that I know has an open entrance courtyard, and as I approach it, I turn quickly into the yard and run up to an archway entry for a unit. I stop at the first few steps, catching my breath, and I open my phone front camera to use it as a sort of mirror to see what the van is doing. They had backed up to the entry of the motel and sat there for a few minutes. Then, the one on the passenger side opened the door and started walking towards the motel. His phone flashlight was on, and I immediately pulled my phone back, listening for his footsteps and readying myself to start banging on the motel door, hoping someone was inside. I waited in silence for a long time, long enough for it to get dark. I finally look out again, and both the man and the van are gone. I call an Uber to take me the last 2 blocks. Sorry, Uber driver. And I never saw them again. Experience 3. I have a friend over, and we want to do a dab. It's about 10 p.m. and my roommates don't like dabbing in the house because of the smell. So he and I go out into the parking lot in front. We're there having a good time when I notice a person walking down the block, pulling on car door handles. I notify him and we watch as that same person comes up to the car and yanks on his back door. He honks his horn and they back up for a minute. And then he walked up to his driver's side window and knocked on the window, making a motion to roll it down. Just as I am about to tell him, don't, he rolls down the window a bit. The person is clean and normally clothed and asks what day it is and what time it is, to which my friend answers. They then stand there and stare at us as he tries to usher them away, even offering them money. Without saying anything, they walk away down the block. And once they reach the intersection between the construction site and woods, they roll their heads back up to the sky and just start screaming at the top of their lungs as they back away out of sight. I take this opportunity to dart back inside my house as my friend watches, making sure to close the patio door. A few hours later, one of my roommates comes home very drunk, and as we figured, they failed to make sure the patio door was shut all the way. Morning time comes, and I wake up in an empty apartment. I open my phone and I have a singular message from my roommate from 3 hours ago, stating that when they left for work this morning, there was a person that they didn't know sleeping inside the patio area. They thought it was a drunk person who lived in the neighborhood and entered the wrong house by mistake, and evidently did not find it enough of a reason to call me or wake me up. I immediately go to the entry of our apartment, pulling the door fast. To my surprise, the person who had been talking to us in the car the night before is laying casually across the staircase, my staircase, fiddling with something. I scream, "Hey!" loudly, and they immediately hop up and run out of the patio door. I run down the stairs and after them after they open the door. They are standing across the street, just smiling at me and giggling. They then gave me a little wave and run off. I close the door hard and go back up to the steps to see what items they had left. Sitting on the steps was a few coins, some weird wire type objects, a lighter, and a pocket knife, and I never saw them again. I also got a lot of questions regarding calling 911 on my last post, and I wanted to clarify. I am from a rural area and have had many bad experiences with cops abusing power, and had been raised to always be wary of police. I've also had situations that were severe enough that I did need to call them, and they didn't help me. So, that is not really a thought that goes through my head when dealing with these situations. And I've learned to take care of myself or utilize community resources for other situations. And these all happened years ago, and it's pretty wild to look back on and remember how terrified I felt these times. So, there are my stories. I hope you all enjoyed. During the story, there is a mention of the F word. It will be bleeped out, so prepare for, a loud beep. But in reality, I just didn't say it. I didn't say it at all. It's a very disgusting word. That is the only thing in this story that is like that. Okay, enjoy the story. This happened nearly a decade ago now. At the time of this story, I was 15, male, 5'5", and 132 pounds, or 60 kilograms. I was a wrestler, so I always knew my exact weight and kept myself extremely lean, but still had a fairly muscular build. I lived in a fairly small town of 50 to 60k people, and in my off-scene I did whatever I could to be somewhat active and outside. I had a friend, let's call him Blaze, who was really into disc golf and always asked to come play with him and smoke a doobie while we were in a more secluded part of the course. He was a couple years older than me, but no bigger than I was. Just a not so great influence for me at the time. This small town had only 2 disc golf courses, one at the very public park near a middle school, or the one at the edge of town in an older park that was much bigger. Obviously, we weren't smoking for everyone to see, so the edge of town sealed off park it is. Little did I know that on Thursday afternoons, this park happened to be my town's spot for gay men to meet and hook up in the parking lots. I live in the Midwest US, so these were not your stylish, young, pretty guys. It was mostly guys aged 30 to 50 who were pretty big and aggressive looking. So we finished the course and the joint, walked out of the woods anything but sober. We typically either just chilled in the grass or played catch after we finished up until my buddy was more normal and ready to drive back. We noticed that there were way more cars in the parking lot than when we got there. A lot of older guys sitting on trunks of their cars or their tailgates, loosely grouped up together. This very large, hairy man in a tank top and his tall, thin friend dressed like a biker gang member started to do the wolf whistle towards me and my friend. I got pretty uncomfortable, not because gay men were whistling at me, but because we had walked in their direction and I could feel the eyes of way more guys on me than I wanted. For a testosterone-filled, weight room junkie teenager, I did not feel safe here knowing that there were at least 30 guys in this group I could see in my peripheral, that a fairly large portion were eyeing us closely as we walked towards the parking lot. I'll make it clear, I am not a fighter, and I would never intend to hurt anyone aside from self-defense, but I was definitely confident in myself to hold someone off. Us two were just outnumbered and not in a sober state of mind, so anxiety made things much worse. A couple of them just said some gross catcall things, more whistles, and that woo noise that rednecks make when they are excited about something or instigating. I'm not gonna do the whole thing. I think they had the idea that we were some of the people they met online and were coming to meet up. Being high, I didn't care what was going on. I just wanted to be safe and not the center of attention. When we got closer, the big hairy man who did the first wolf whistle said something like, "You think you could handle this?" And I just mumbled, "No thanks." And I tried to keep walking. He yelled back, "What was that, boy?" To which I just said more clearly, "No thanks, I'm not into that." He seemed offended and angrily said, "Not into what?" All I said was, "Sorry, I'm not gay." And he seemed to be offended by the word gay, asking me to repeat myself in a very aggressive tone. So I corrected myself and said I'm not a homosexual. Things escalated from here real quick. The man stepped forward from leaning against a truck and grabbed my wrist. He said, "We can fix that real quick." Don't get excited. I didn't do some cool fight move to attack him. Just a simple wrist roll and, using that momentum, a quick push of the elbow to turn him around so that he would have his back to me and I could get by without anything more. He said, "Touch me like that again and we will get both of you." Another guy made his way over to Blaze, who was much less the calm and chill type stoner that I was. I can only describe as what he did as one of those kicks or sidesteps off of a wall. He kicked the wall and leaped off into the guy's chest. He started to run and yelled, "Piss off!" Very quickly, bunches of guys began to stand up from their seats on the outside of their cars and motion our direction. I started to book it for the car too, and Mr. Skinny Biker Man was running right after us. Thank God it was just him running and not multiple chasing us, or this story might be different. I was faster than Blaze, so I got ahead of him. And picture us running across a parking lot to his truck that was facing us, backed into a stall. I got around to the passenger side quickly with Blaze still about 100 feet from the truck. He tried to cut to the right and make it to the driver's side of his little S10, but Skinny cut him off and sent him to the left passenger side. I ran around to the back of the truck as fast as I could to the driver door, and Blaze slid his keys across the roof to me. I hopped in, well aware that I did not want to be driving right now in this state of mind, much less in such a crazy situation, and even more less someone else's vehicle. Still without thinking, I started it and skirted out of the parking lot while Skinny banged on the bed of our truck chasing. That is not the end. A truck and a car are on their way right behind me. Skinny jumped into a car and was in the back, and the chase began. Terrified and still high, I cut through the grass of the parking lot to the main road more quickly, thinking I would lose them that way. These guys raced over to the speed bumps and around the bends in the park road right up to the main road, and they were driving so fast I would have gotten T-boned if I didn't smash the pedal to the floor at the right time. I'm so stressed I started silently crying while driving, thinking of how horrible the possibilities could be. Contact wearers know that when your eyes are dry, then they rapidly get moist. Contacts tend to drift a bit until they find their place again. This is definitely not ideal for someone with awful vision driving twice the speed limit down the road in the middle of town. So I started turning down residential streets and weaving in and out, being tapped on the shoulder by Blaze to keep up my speed up because the two were still right on my rear bumper. I even made some risky U-turns and they followed right along. This chase lasted over 10 minutes of me frantically driving through the main streets, residential, back alleys, and everything I could try to get away. I was so scared, but the best case scenario ended us obtaining a permanent record for DUI at the ripe age of 15. Luckily, a stroke of luck and a surprisingly quick reflex came to my aid. Blaze yelled, "Cop!" and pointed to the parking lot to our left. There was a police cruiser probably just waiting to catch someone speeding or running red lights in the semi-busy road we ended up on. I whipped it into the parking lot and parked a couple stalls down from the cop. The truck prepared to turn but stopped in the middle of the road so quickly once he realized what was going on that the car following him had to swerve and popped a curb. Catching the officer's attention, he backed out and the two vehicles split different ways and were right out of sight before he got out of the parking lot. I never went back to that part any other time than the mornings after that. I'm so thankful that nothing bad came of the incident and we made it out completely unscathed. No idea what they would have done, but people engaging teenagers in a car chase would not have good intentions in my mind. It was my first time in my life being sexually harassed too. You would think being in a car chase might be fun or exciting, but I felt so powerless and like I had no control. Like nothing I could do would get away from these guys, and it would simultaneously probably get me arrested. I just discovered this subreddit today on my main account, but I was nervous to post this due to the nature of it. I still wouldn't go anywhere near that place after noon again. At first, I wasn't going to share this story, but now I'm more over the situation. Before we start, judge me all you want, but I know I can be a bit stupid. It's only because I don't like to force myself to live on the edge because of the sick people in this world. I live my life as freely and fearlessly as I possibly can. At the time of this story, I was only 23. My birthday just passed on the 29th of November, making me 24 now. I'm only 5'2" and around 170 to 180 pounds. I'm strong enough to help move furniture, but not strong enough to defend myself the way I would like. You would think as someone who has survived an attempted sexual assault, I would learn some self-defense, but I've lost a lot of motivation and self-worth since. The abusive relationship really made it worse. That's besides the point. So, to start, I won't get into the major details, but I had just moved to Jackson, Tennessee from Miami, Florida, because I had just gotten out of an extremely physically, emotionally, and mentally abusive relationship that lasted 3 years. About sometime into June, my current boyfriend and I had been doing trips pretty much every weekend. We would visit a new hiking trail and waterfall area. Although there isn't a nightlife, Tennessee is amazing and beautiful. We went to this place called Narrows on the Harpeth. This was one of the underwhelming places that we have been, but it's still relaxing. After we found a cool place to sit and swim after hiking for a couple hours, a few shots, and one blunt later, it was time to make the hour trip back to Jackson. I had put my shoes on and I slipped my black dress on, which was a little bit above the knee length, like if I bent too far forward, my little bum would be on display. I own my body and sexuality, so showing some skin never really bothers me, and I don't really think about it because I just expect people to respect me as I respect them in the way they dress. Anyways, on the way back to the car, I, being the tipsy, dumb one, as I am, managed to trip and fall and scrape my leg pretty badly. It's actually scarred now. Anyways, I tell my boyfriend we need to go to Walmart once back in Jackson so I could thoroughly clean my wound with hydrogen peroxide and Neosporin. My boyfriend says, okay. An hour later we are at Walmart. Mind you, it is only 9 p.m. going on to 10. I'm not late by any means. We get what we need, but because I'm still a little tipsy and pretty high from the blunt I finished in the car ride home, I got distracted so easily and remembered that my boyfriend got me the wrong size case for my iPhone 11 Pro. Lil flex. He got the Max instead of just the Pro. I wanted an idea of what I could trade it for, and he wanted to look at some of the games as well as the gaming PC for me. So, I am happily tipsy and excited to find a new case, which, if you have ever been to Walmart, the cases are never in order and often cause you to bend down to look at things. There was a man looking at the cases, and I just said, "Excuse me, can I look at those cases you're standing in front of?" He just looked at me with a blank yet so dirty look. He nodded and stepped over. As I am happily looking through the shelf, about 10 minutes in, this lady and what I assume are her 2 children approach me. Mind you, we are in the middle of Walmart. Mind you, we are in the middle of a pandemic, and I am thrown off by how close she is to me, especially with her baby that looks no older than 9 months. I step back and she just grabs my arm and says, "OMG, I haven't seen you in forever. Look at that hair. Wow." Her grip tightens. At this point, my heart is racing, my face gets hot, and I am visibly scared. That's when my boyfriend says, "Everything okay, babe?" He looks at me equally concerned. I am thinking to myself, does this lady know my mom? Who is she? Is she an old family friend? I don't remember. Mind you, I'm originally from Ohio. We have family here, but I don't know any of my family that lives in Tennessee. So my mom loves to brag about her kids, so I'm trying to shake this weird feeling, but her daughter keeps looking behind me. So I go to turn around and she goes, "No, don't turn around. Walk with me, please. Trust me." I don't know why, but I felt she was being genuine and I just followed her. We step over to the side of the baby clothes and it is still in front of the electronics when she says, "Baby, I'm sorry to scare you, but there are 3 men surrounding you. They went by the laptops and I noticed a guy taking photos and video of you while you were bent over looking at the cases. The other man was the tall guy next to you, and I don't know where the 3rd guy went." All I can remember is this high-pitched ringing in my ears. My stomach flipped and I felt I was going to be sick. I never knew what people meant when they said everything slowed down, but in that moment everything moved in slow motion and I was freaked out to the point I had no clue what she said after that. It was as if I blacked out for a moment and then quickly came to the realization that my family and my boyfriend were looking at me, visibly panicked. I turned around and there he was. He is Hispanic, shorter than me, and maybe about 5'1", but he is very much built, also looked to be about 40. The older man, who was white and maybe in his 40s, was about 5'11". I will never forget the dead blank range in that man's Hispanic eyes. Like his first meal in 5 days had been stolen from him, and he was ready to kill in order to have it back. That's when I saw the white man walk over to him. They said something. Both looked at me, looked back at each other, and said something else, and started to walk slowly towards us. At that point, we were all turned and headed for the registers. That's when I thanked my lucky stars because there were about 3 cops at the front of the store. By the time I rudely pushed people out of the way to get to the self-checkout, with tears in my eyes and frantically repeating excuses to anyone who got in front of me, I looked back and saw them just standing there, but with the 3rd guy this time. My heart sank and I wanted to pass out at that moment. I guess it just looked like I was going up to the cops because they hightailed it once they saw me get close to the cops. Me being high and being a black woman, I wasn't going to chance the cops turning this around on me because I was simply stoned and tipsy. My only thought was, get to the car, get to the gun, don't stop, run. My boyfriend said he could barely keep up with me at this point, and I had to grab his hand so tight he had to force the grip up because it felt like I was, quote, going to crush his hands. And before anyone bashes my boyfriend, I don't expect a man to be my savior. Also, he isn't the angry and confrontational type. He is very calm and level-headed. He wouldn't hurt a fly unless I asked him to get rid of it for whatever reason. I just knew I was the target and I am putting him at risk. I knew they could easily jump on him. One of them could overpower me after taking him out. I probably looked crazy half walking and running past everyone, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to become another missing sister. We made it to the car safely and peel out of there. I've never seen him drive so fast, as he is beyond careful and would never speed. We sat at the Sonic for about an hour to make sure we weren't being followed. We recounted everything that happened. I couldn't believe we were both too tipsy to notice that I had become prey in somewhere as simple as Walmart. I've never felt so stupid and irresponsible in my life. I never want to experience that fear and panic in my life again. I didn't even get the chance to thank the lady who pretty much saved us. Sometimes we talk about it. What if the lady didn't see what that guy was doing? Even if we catched on, there were 3 of us and we only saw 2 at first. I think of the horrors. That night, I had a nightmare that the men attacked us in the parking lot. The creepiest part of the dream was the 3rd man shoved me in the trunk, and I went to look at his face, and all I could see was a featureless face. I woke up in tears that night, realizing I didn't get a clear look of the 3rd guy's face. It took me nearly a month to enter a Walmart again, since I have moved states and I have only been to Walmart once since moving there. So, to the creepy men who stalked me, upskirted me, and basically followed me when they knew I was around other people, I genuinely hope we never meet again, because the gun I carry on my person now has 3 beautiful halos that would enjoy meeting you all. A few years ago, I was renting a house in Northern California. The neighborhood was just outside the suburbs. It seemed like the perfect balance of having space and having nice neighbors close enough not to feel isolated. The area had no streetlights, so it was very dark at night, especially if there were clouds blocking the moonlight. It didn't bother me though. It made my little house feel more quaint on dark nights. I got home from work one day in midwinter. It was a cloudy night, so pulling up to my house, I saw only what my headlights and front porch illuminated. When I got out of the car, I caught a whiff of cigarette smoke. That was odd, as I had never smelled that before around the house, and I didn't see anyone nearby, so I ignored it and went inside. I had just got off a shift with a few hours of overtime, so I felt pretty tired. Even though it wasn't even 7 yet, I decided to take a shower and call it a night. I woke up sometime later that I had heard some noise inside my house. I wasn't worried right away because my friend would sometimes stop by and use the shower after work on his way to his night classes. I even gave him a spare key so he could stop by even if I wasn't home. He would always text me to let me know beforehand though, and I hadn't heard my phone go off. I reached over to my bedside table and picked up my cell phone to see if my friend had sent me a text. The bright light from my phone screen and number pad blinded me. These were the days before phones had a light sensor that would dim the screen in the dark, and this particular phone was so bright I could use it as a flashlight. Through squinted eyes, I could make out that it was 9 something, but I couldn't tell if I had an unread text or not. I set my phone aside and called out my friend's name. There were a couple seconds of silence before I heard loud footsteps as someone started running through the bottom floor of my house. I leapt out of bed and ran to the closet. They were already up the stairs by the time I had opened this door and stepped inside. The house had 3 rooms upstairs, 2 bedrooms on either side of the hallway. The one I was in was a spare, and a bathroom at the end. The bedroom doors were both closed, but the bathroom door was cracked open. I heard whoever was in my house thunder down the hallway past my door and into my bathroom. That gave me enough time to open the attic access in the ceiling of my closet and hoist myself up. I had just started to lift myself up when the person ran back out of the bathroom. My feet were barely inside the attic when my bedroom door burst open. I heard footsteps run into my room and stop. When they didn't see me in that room, they ran back to the hallway and into the other room, which was just boxes stacked in a corner, some weights, and a table where I painted my miniature models. I guess they decided that if someone were hiding, it would be in the bedroom, because they charged back into my room and turned on the light. A moment later, the closet door was ripped open. I was crouched in my attic just a foot away or so from the access, so I could try to stop them if they started to climb up. From my vantage point, all I could see was from their knee down. They were wearing dirty blue jeans and frayed cuffs and worn work boots. After a few seconds of looking in the closet, they stepped away, and I heard a loud crash come from my room, followed by a scream of frustration and anger. That scream was the most unnerving part of the incident for me. It reminded me far too much of my stepfather, who would scream in a similar way when he lost his temper. He would eventually be put in a mental hospital for severe mental disorders that resulted in erratic and violent tendencies. The man in my house ran back down the stairs. I heard crashes and clatters as things were thrown around and furniture was knocked over. I stayed crouched in the attic and had left my cell phone when I ran for the closet. I wasn't certain I could climb down without him hearing. After some time, the noises stopped. I started counting slowly. When I reached 1,000, I decided it was safe enough to climb down and call the police. The first thing I noticed when I exited the closet was the intruder had flipped my bed over, I assume in an attempt to find me. That was the loud noise I had heard after he stepped away from the closet. I couldn't find my cell phone, so I went to the landline by the bed and called the police. I waited in my room until I heard them call out from downstairs. The first floor was a mess, but I had expected that. Chairs had been knocked over, the sofa had been flipped, all the books, pictures, and knickknacks I had on my shelves were strewn across the floor. The cupboards in the kitchen had been opened and all the boxes and canned foods had been thrown on the ground. As far as I could tell though, the only thing missing was a single knife out of the wooden block in my kitchen. The police checked the house from top to bottom. They found that the side door had been forced open by something like a crowbar. They had also found a few cigarette butts along my fence line, with some foil and an empty pen tube which the police said was often used to smoke meth. So they think he had been watching my house for a while. I realized that he must have been out there smoking a cigarette when I got home. They collected up the evidence and told me I should stay with the family or friends to that night and get that door fixed as soon as possible. I opted just to not sleep. I moved a shelf over to block the broken door and spent the next couple hours cleaning up. I would often go to the window with a flashlight and shine it along the fence line where the police found the cigarette butts and foil, but I didn't see anything. The next day, I called to have the door fixed and motion lights installed at the back and sides of my house. I ran a phone cable up to the attic and added a landline. I never wanted to be stuck up there without a phone again. Nothing else happened in that house though. I lived there another 3 years without incident. I try not to think about what would have happened if I had been a bit slower getting into the attic, or if he hadn't gone into the bathroom at the end of the hall first.
My story begins a few years ago. I decided to use my computer skills to run a small darknet forum, mainly just to share information without censorship. At first I was extremely paranoid about my site getting hacked and having my anonymity being compromised, so I went online and began to research everything. After countless days of scouring blogs, forums, and other material, I decided I was ready. Now I didn't have any money, so I couldn't buy a VPS and host the site offshore or whatever, so I decided to use my old laptop. After all, I wasn't planning on running a major website. So after setting the server up and what I thought was literally every single thing I could do to harden it against attack, I put the site online. Everything went great for a couple of months. Donations rolled in as the user base grew larger and larger. After around 5 months, the user base had gotten so big I had to upgrade and migrate everything to a new PC, which I built just to host the forum, and from there everything seemed perfect. The site was running smoothly and there were no issues with the migration. Until one day, when I came home and noticed the PC had frozen. I didn't think much to it, maybe just a software bug, cause I had rebooted and it was clear something was wrong with the PC when it began to light up, beeped a few times, then shut off. So I thought to myself, okay, it's a hardware issue. After a few hours trying to diagnose the issue, I figured it out and turned out the RAM had been corrupted. I took it back to the store since it was still under warranty. The customer rep told me it might have just been a faulty stick. When I got home, I replaced the stick of RAM and had the site backed up and running within a few hours. Everything seemed to be perfect again. I apologized to the users for the downtime and everyone seemed to be happy enough. Fast forward a few months, the forums have been up and running for around a year, for about a year and a half now. This is when things started to get really weird. I finished work on a Friday. It was a gorgeous day. In the middle of summer, I came home, had something to eat, and sat down in front of my PC and noticed I had a message. I realized that somewhere I'd messed up. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not like in a Sage or anything. I don't really know why anybody would actually target me, but the world is a crazy place, so whatever. The message had my details from my name, address, bank details, passwords, private emails, private messages, everything from nearly every single device I owned. I freaked out and I immediately took the PC offline. Turned my internet off, but little did I know that this guy had done his research. After a couple of hours pacing my room, I received another text message.
I know everything about you.
The message was sent via some type of SMS service, so there was no way to trace it. And then my phone rang.
Don't talk, just listen. I know everything there is to know about you. All I want is 2 Bitcoin or things will get worse. I'll send you a text with the wallet details.
The phone call ended just as quickly as it started. I opened my laptop and checked my Bitcoin wallet. There was enough left over from the donations to pay off the guy, and I hoped it would be the end of it. so I entered the guy's details and sent a payment. And then my phone rang again.
Thank you for complying. Unfortunately, someone I know really likes you.
He hung up. Panicking, I called the number back. An automated message began to play. The number you have dialed has not been recognized. A few hours passed and I began to think to myself, maybe the last call was just him having fun. And after a long day, I decided to just go to bed. Sometime around 2 a.m., I was woken up by the sound of banging at my front door. I jumped out of bed and turned on all the lights. Grabbing a knife from the kitchen, I walked slowly towards the window, and I looked out. I could see someone standing by my car. When they spotted me, they got in and drove off. I rushed to the door in hopes I might be able to get a license plate, but by the time I opened it, they'd already turned the corner. As I turned, I noticed an envelope on the floor. I picked it up, went back inside, and locked the door. Closed the curtains and sat in the kitchen. I placed the envelope on the counter and stared at it for around half an hour, trying to muster up the courage to open it. Did these guys really come to my house? I thought to myself. After the half hour was up, I decided enough was enough. I opened the envelope and pictures fell out onto the counter where they were of me sleeping. These guys had not only been outside my house, they'd been inside whilst I was sleeping. The images had been edited and strange love hearts had been added next to me. So now I was sufficiently freaked out. I didn't go back to sleep, and when the sun broke the darkness, I decided to head to the police station and tell them everything. I hadn't broken any laws, so I hoped they would just help me at least. After hours of explaining everything, they told me there was nothing they could do. At this point, I had never felt so alone in the world. I was scared of what this guy was planning for me. I didn't have any idea of what I was supposed to do or expect, so I decided to wipe everything on my laptop, PC, and phone. I picked up everything I needed, stuffed it into a bag, and decided to leave. I had a couple of friends that I knew that I could rely, so I called up an old buddy named Marcus, and we met, had a few beers, and I explained everything to him. He offered me a place to stay, and I hoped it would be the end of everything. A few days later, it happened again. There was a knock at the door, first thing in the morning. Me and Marcus both went out to find another envelope. Same thing, pictures of me sleeping, but these were in Marcus's house. I started freaking out again, and Marcus just said, "Okay, well, we need to do something. Maybe set a trap or something." So we went over numerous ideas, everything you could think of, from cameras to baiting him. We even settled on the idea of staying up during the night and locking him in the room. We filled the bed up with pillows, set up cameras, and even barred the windows in the room. We hid in the room next door. After a few hours had passed, we heard the lock rattling on the front door, and we knew it was game time. We'd left the door just slightly ajar so we could see outside, and he went past, and the moment he went into the room, we both sprung into action. Quickly as we could, we closed the door and locked it from outside using a chair and a metal bar. There was only one way he was getting out, and he'd have to destroy the door. We could see the silhouette of him as he paced the room quietly. It was creepy. We called the police as we kept an eye on him. At last, I thought, I can finish this and move on with my life. Just as the police arrived, we noticed the guy take out a gun and place it onto his head, which he held up a sign that read, "I love you." And then he pulled the trigger. The police barged in, guns drawn, told us to both get on the floor. We complied and shouted, "He's in there!" pointing at the door. The police removed the makeshift lock and entered the room, called for an ambulance, and put me and Marcus in the back of a police car. I'd been sat in the interview room for a good couple of hours, I guess whilst they carried out the investigation, when a detective came in and sat down in front of me, opening a folder and placing pictures on the table. "Do you know her?" "Her?" I said, looking at the pictures. "No," I replied, confused. He looked at me and said, "This is the person who's been stalking you." And then he began to tell me they had visited her home and found a shrine with photos of me all over the place, from restaurants to the gym, even shopping. He went on to tell me that she'd been the one that sent the messages, made the phone calls, etc. And they'd also found a diary which had some kind of future plans of me and her. She wanted to be my wife, and we'd been chatting for around a year and a half at the moment I started the forum. After I explained everything, the detective said I was lucky to be alive. She had been planning to drug and kidnap me. She'd even made some makeshift lock bed so I wouldn't be able to escape. To this day, I feel very lucky, and I haven't been on the dark web since. Let me start this off by saying that it is imperative that you stay off the dark/deep web, no matter what anyone tells you. No good can come from using it, and I'm about to tell you why. I was 15 at the time. I had come home from school on a Friday afternoon ready to relax, kick back, and enjoy the short break. I had started using code about a year prior. Nothing too fancy, just basic Python, Java, HTTPS, etc. And I was practicing it daily. Now, I had known about the dark web before this took place. I would sometimes buy weed off of it, but that was the extent of it. This particular day, however, I decided to venture further and really take a look at the dark web. I'm pretty sure a lot of people are familiar with the iceberg diagram representing the internet's content. For those who don't know, the surface web contains about 10% of the internet's content, while the deep and dark web take up the other 90%. I was ready to see what it really held. I heard stories about what goes down on the deep web: murder, inhumane torture, CP, etc. But I didn't really believe that they were all legit, so I hopped on Tor and began to see what I could dig up. I started off by going on the hidden wiki and browsing through various websites, most of which contained illegal things such as drugs, hackers and hitmen for hire, and lots of CP. I clicked on a random forum link, which took about a minute to load. I wish I could remember the name of it. It was a forum where people could pick a topic. Like, let's say they wanted to talk about politics, dealing with mental health, stuff like that. I noticed one of the topics was a pedophile forum. And I don't even want to go into detail on what I saw on there. There was no particular one that caught my eye. The link was in all red, while the rest were all black. It said, "Not for the weak. Enter at your own risk." Curious as to what it was, I clicked on the link and it brought me to a forum that had only one link on the whole page. I clicked on the link and it brought me to a chat room. I realized that nobody was saying anything on it, only sending links, because I had an idea of what was on these links. I wish I had listened to my gut feeling, which was telling me to close out while you still can. However, the ignorant, curious teen took over me, and I started setting up some protection for myself using the code I had learned. I later realized this amateur coding I did would not protect me from these advanced people with malicious intent. I clicked on a random link and a page loaded surprisingly fast. It looked to be another chat room. I went to type hello or something, but it would not let me. I sighed and began moving my mouse to go to the previous page when a noise went off. I had received a chat. The message said, "Hello, new user. I see you have found my site. Would you like to continue?" I had tried typing again, but I still couldn't. The next message sent chills down my back, and my hands are shaking just recalling it. It read, "No, son, not the keyboard." I tried turning off my computer, but of course nothing worked. Another message popped up saying, "I guess I'll take that as a no." The screen suddenly changed and a video began playing. It was a black screen, but I could hear a deep male voice say,
Unfortunately for you, you do not have a choice.
I grabbed a sticky note and I put it over my webcam, and the voice on the screen said,
Ah, so we're playing games now, huh? Well, I can play.
The video then began to change, and I realized the man was taking his hand off the camera. He was a short man, maybe 5'11", but that brought me no comfort. He held up a knife and said,
Name any body part.
I then, for the first time, noticed a cloth in the corner of the room, covering up something which I could only assume to be a body. I had had enough. I unplugged my computer and I laid on the floor, panting for hours until I could finally get up. I now suffer from anxiety, and I will not touch a computer unless I have to. Just be safe out there, you guys. I had just started in a summer job where I was basically a custodian, cleaning classrooms in preparation for the upcoming school year. My dad worked for the town's district, so he was able to get me this job. I was the youngest one there, as I'm only 20, and there are a handful of people that worked with me. They were usually off doing some other tasks like waxing the floor or covering up foul writing on the walls with paint. The schools were completely empty, besides the staff who was cleaning. Things were going fine my first couple of weeks. For the most part, I was on my own, wiping down desks and dusting while listening to music. It was nice, and I enjoyed not having someone on my butt telling me every day what to do. After I had finished cleaning the middle school, the head custodian had sent me and another woman, we'll call her Karen, who was my coworker, to go start cleaning the high school. She was a slacker who'd often go out to smoke cigarettes, but she was really nice. She didn't really care what I did, and I was always off doing whatever she wanted. So yeah, basically, I was alone. Again, I didn't mind because I liked the freedom, but I was taking a bulk of the work. A few days had gone by and I finished cleaning a couple hallways. It was time to move to the basement where the robotics and woodworking classes were. I didn't think anything of it as I got down there. I noticed light was peeking through under the doorway of the classroom. The windows of the class were covered with shades. I found this really odd since it was summer and no one was in the building besides Karen and I. I walked over and peeked in the door window. The lamp was on at the desk, but no one was inside. I proceeded to knock. No answer. After turning the knob, I realized this door was locked, so I used my key to open the door. A musty smell flooded my nose. I decided to scope out the room. Maybe someone had forgotten to turn the lamp off. I disregarded the idea when I noticed the computer at the teacher's desk was on. The screen looked weird. I'd never seen this layout before. The website was all black with red writing on it. It also had a chat box. I didn't have time to read the chat because a sudden voice from the door came behind me.
Sir, can I help you?
Sorry, I'm just cleaning the classrooms and I didn't know if anyone was in here. Sorry.
So I see. Well, I appreciate that, but don't worry about it in here. I'm, I, I'm working on a few things, so sawdust is gonna get everywhere again, and you can just clean it after I'm done.
No problem.
Wait, could I ask you a favor? I have this, petition. It's to get more funding for the extracurricular classes, like art and woodworking.
He sounded so uncertain, as if he made it up out of thin air. Sure, I said. I paused for a moment when he handed me the paper. It only had 2 of the names on it. The petition required a full name, phone number, email, and address. I immediately felt uncomfortable, but I didn't know how to decline, so I just added my information.
Thank you so much, dear. You have a beautiful bone structure, by the way.
Thanks. I grabbed my cleaning supplies and I sped out of there. After that experience, I didn't really put much thought into it. Yeah, he was creepy, but I didn't really have much evidence to persuade myself that he was out to get me or something, until I started running into him throughout the school. It became pretty frequent. It's as though he was watching me. Now I was concerned. I dismissed it because he just smiled and waved after I saw him. Maybe I was overreacting. I mean, he was a teacher there after all. Still, my gut feeling was telling me something wasn't right. Weeks went on and I started to notice him less and less. I only had a few more weeks at this job and then I'm back off to college. One day, the boss let everyone out early since it was almost 100 degrees. I got home and decided to hang out with some friends. It was a group of us, about 5 or 6. My boyfriend's brother joined us this time, which was unusual since he's usually not a social person. He is really into technology, so he's always on his computer, which he built himself. He's also good at hacking and stuff like that. Anyway, that day he told me he needed to talk to me, and it was serious. I was conceited, but we weren't close, so it must have been legit. He brought me into my friend's living room and pulled out his laptop. To my surprise, he was on the deep web. So, you are up for bid on the deep web. He hesitated as he said this. Wait, what? I knew how the deep web worked. I would often listen to horror stories, but I'd never been on it, so how would my info even get on there? It suddenly clicked. The web page matched the one I saw in the classroom a month back. I had also given my info to that guy. My heart felt like it dropped to my stomach. I explained this to my boyfriend's brother. He advised me to call the police immediately, which is what we did. They did an investigation on the teacher and found the activity on his computer. Not only that, but he had several girls' information, along with pictures. Some of the girls were minors too. There were also wooden contraptions they found in his home, which he probably made in the shop. He probably planned to use them on these girls. Or me. I was disgusted, but relieved that he was caught. I often wonder what would have happened if the page was never discovered. Would he have kidnapped me and killed me online for these sick people? I don't know, and I don't want to know. I changed my number and I've since moved on from the incident. This just goes to show you, you can never give out your personal information. Please, stay safe on the internet. Thank you for listening. In 2016, my boyfriend, now my husband, and I went camping in eastern Pennsylvania. The place we decided to stop for the night was primitive. Camping was free, no cell service, barely a road, etc. We did encounter 2 other people. They might not factor into what happened later at all, but they were creepy, so I'll describe them. The first was a woman who had her truck off to the side of the road a little as we drove past. She had the hood open and seemed to be waiting for someone to stop and offer to help. Usually my boyfriend had no problem helping someone, but he said this time something about her put him off. She didn't really seem like she needed help, and usually people who need help look at you hopefully as you approach. She looked like she just expected we would stop. That's what my boyfriend said anyway. I hadn't really noticed anything that strange about her. The next person came when we had chosen a spot and were setting up a fire for hot dogs. I had noticed people drive by a few times, but my boyfriend pointed out each time the same car, and the man in the car watched us each time as he passed. My boyfriend was a little uneasy about this, but we had driven around for a while before finding a place we liked. It had been raining and everything was muddy, and we wanted the driest site possible. He could have been doing the same thing. We briefly thought about moving, but the road was way too muddy. If he wanted to find us, all he had to do was follow the tracks. There were some other tracks, but not many. He'd only have to backtrack a little to locate us again. He didn't come by another time, so we stayed and spent the several remaining hours before dark just goofing off. No one else drove by. Whether or not those 2 had anything to do with our experience, the real fear came later. We had gone to sleep in our tent, and sometime around 3 a.m. we were awoken by this very loud noise. I can't describe it very well, or even remember exactly what it sounded like, but my boyfriend said it reminded him of a chain gun revving up. It was also similar to how it would sound if someone recorded a shovel being dragged over gravel, and playing it over a loudspeaker is another way he would describe it. He jumped up and looked out the little window, but couldn't see anything. The sound repeated itself another few times. I was too scared to speak, so my boyfriend whispered that it was probably miles off and I should go back to sleep. I didn't question this, as I figured loud sounds could easily be heard miles off. After we left, he told me it sounded like it had been coming just from down the road, but he didn't want to freak me out. Looking back, I probably should have wondered why he would bother to whisper if apparently the sound was far off. I was still terrified. Every little thing I heard outside sounded like someone was walking around the tent. We laid there for a while longer, when finally my boyfriend told me to get dressed because we were leaving. I got alarmed by this, and even more alarmed when he unwrapped the machete we had brought just for the trip from its plastic before we even opened the tent. We quickly packed up and loaded the car. I looked around for footprints that weren't our own, but despite the moon providing plenty of light, I couldn't really see. I did point out something my boyfriend hadn't noticed though before we got into the car. There was a beer can by our dead fire that hasn't been there before. We didn't bring beer. While we were driving away, my boyfriend explained that he was nervous someone might have been trying to lure us out, so he didn't think it was a good idea to run from the tent right away. He also half expected to find out our gas tank had been siphoned out, but that wouldn't have stopped us because we had a hybrid car. We joked that it would make a funny hybrid commercial. Number of brutal murders avoided by driving a hybrid. 2, we only joked because we were just about crapping ourselves from fear and adrenaline, even that. The rest of our trip we only stayed in well-populated campsites or got a hotel. I was in Shenandoah at a Strickler knob about 8 months ago. I ended up camping out there, despite 45-degree weather at night. I arrived at the parking area about 7 a.m. and noticed that there were no cars. I planned on spending the night and hiking back in the morning since it was quite a drive. After hiking the entire route and coming back halfway to set up camp, it was close to 3 p.m. I spent the rest of the afternoon and evening eating food, smoking a little reefer, and enjoying the peaceful area. After I finished watching a movie on my phone, I decided it was time to call it a night around 7 p.m. I put all the trash and remaining food items in a bag and hung it 20 feet on a branch about 150 feet away from my campsite. I was extremely tired, so after making sure I was safe from any predators, I went to grab some firewood and prepared to sleep. As I grabbed some dreadwood from a huge fallen tree, I heard extremely intense rustling moving towards me for about 3 seconds that seemed to come from about 100 feet away. It stopped as soon as I stopped and faced the direction of the noise. Totally freaked out, and about 50 feet from my tent, I slowly backed up while shining my flashlight on the area to hopefully expose the source of the noise. Nothing. I made it back to my tent, and it was quite dark by this time, and I could barely see 10 feet in front of me. It was now about 8:15 p.m. I was extremely unsettled, so I stayed outside of my tent and continued to stroke the fire, which only provided about 5 feet of light in every direction. It almost made me feel like a target more than it made me feel safe. I finally felt comfortable after no rustling for about 20 minutes, so I headed into my tent and got some much needed sleep. Tried to. Just as I could feel myself transitioning into a deep sleep, I began to hear multiple women wailing in an extremely evil chanting matter that sounded like it was around 200 yards away, but was also very muffled and faint. As I came to my full level of awareness, it started to get louder. In a matter of 30 seconds, it sounded like it was less than 50 yards away. I felt a level of adrenaline that I have never felt before. It felt primal. My entire body tensed up like I was hit with a stun gun or an ice bath. I would like to note at this point in my story, I was no longer intoxicated in any way, and I was feeling no residual effects of the small amount of marijuana I ingested several hours earlier. About 3 seconds after the noise got to around 50 yards away, it totally stopped. I slowly crawled out of my tent and yelled, "Hey! Who is that?" Complete silence consumed the entire 100-foot area I was camped in. I turned on my massive flashlight and shined it everywhere I could see an eerie energy. Nothing. As I made one last round with my flashlight, I saw something. that would change my view on monsters and the paranormal forever. I briefly saw a woman for about 0.25 seconds who was fleeing from the tree line facing away from me, making almost no noise as she did so. She was wearing a medium-length white dress with insane amounts of dirt all over her, and she was bald. She also had no shoes and was flailing her hands in the air, whilst making no wailing noises anymore. She ran in the way a child would if they were caught trying to sneak up on you. I couldn't even utter a sound. I began to fear for my life so badly that I began crying and my face was stuck in a frowning position. I went into full panic attack and grabbed my pack, which was thankfully already set up for my 5 a.m. departure. I left my tent and began running. I started making towards the tree line and markers for the trail started at. I could see a small light about 200 feet in front of me at the bottom of the hill. I began running at my maximum safe speed, which was about 3.5 miles per hour with my 20-pound back, considering it was 10:45 p.m. and the terrain was rocky and covered with roots and flying slick dirt. I fell once coming towards the bottom of the first large descent and saw the same woman as my eyes fell toward the ground during my fall. Luckily, I only scraped my knee on some gravel since I stayed on one of the sides of the trail. I started moving slowly as was constantly looking around, gripping my Benchmade Adamus 375 knife tighter than ever. As I approached the last part of the trail, which was totally flat and more grassy, I hadn't seen anything in over 2 miles. Suddenly and violently, I began to hear rustling from every direction, roughly 100 yards away from me, and it was coming up fast. I began running at full sprint for the last 0.2 miles of the trail, finally passing the trailhead and approaching the parking area. I made it back to my car, and as I turned around, I saw 3 of the same woman I saw before, whom all began crawling on all fours, full speed away from me and towards the trail. As I shined my headlamp on them, I cried for the first 20 minutes after driving at full speed away from the trail, just happy to still be alive and not fully grasping the entire situation. I made it back to Route 81 and could still feel those evil, human-like creatures, the feeling they emanated. Moral of the story: hike with a partner. To be clear, I am not forestry, I just have a related story. My cousin is with the Forest Service in the Montana/Wyoming area, and I decided to go up there with her to literally test the waters. She does hydrology and has to ride out to the middle of nowhere to test streams and snow runoff to ensure no contaminants. So I thought that sounded fun and wanted to do a bit of a tour with her. We were going to have to camp out there for 2 nights, so we packed up all our gear in sandal bags or sandal bundles and started out. The first day and night was amazing. Beautiful scenery and amazing air quality. It really is so peaceful out there. I love that area and wish I got to go up there more often. Anyway, we started out on the second day and my cousin said, "You want to see something weird?" Of course, I said yes. So she led me on a bit of a side journey into this tiny little ravine. We ended up traveling about 2 hours away from our actual path we had laid out. At the very end of this fold in the land, she dismounts and tells me to go off my horse. We tie them up in this gorgeous little clearing and she tells me to follow this tiny wildlife path and brings our little rechargeable radio. It is one of those you can plug in or wind up, and it also acts as a lantern if you really need it to, but that kills the batteries quickly. Well, I do that, and out of the middle of nowhere, there was a huge coil of wire sticking out of the ground. The wire itself is not weirdly large, like some buried transmission wire, but small, like 10 or 12 gauge wiring for a house. It traveled off into the bush and trees, so naturally I decided to follow the damn thing out of curiosity. My cousin trails behind me as I do, and this wire, after coming straight up from the ground, is strung across limbs of trees, then back to the ground. Then it shakes around, it rocks, and finally dead ends into an outlet. That outlet is mounted on the side of a desk. It looks like a school teacher's desk from when I was growing up, with a metal base and a pseudo wood/plastic top thing. No chair, no building, no nothing. Just this outlet and this desk. I'm staring at this thing confused as hell. A desk in the middle of the forest, when my cousin takes the radio, pulls out the cord, and plugs it into the outlet. That fucker then lit up and started blaring static. The wire was being fed from somewhere. Now, the place where we were had no road access, no buildings for many miles, and no other people around. And yet, there was a live outlet. No spooky jump scares or bodies, just one lone powered desk in the middle of the woods.
Three years ago, I was living with my then boyfriend in a 1-bedroom apartment in a little mountain town. It was a half basement unit, so the bottom of all of our windows were level with the ground outside. It was also an older apartment, and not all the windows could fully lock. One day, my boyfriend comes home from work while I'm laying on the sofa and immediately runs up to the window near me and looks out of it frantically. He then goes to look out every other window in his house. Then he walks around outside, looking in the windows. When he comes back from this confused exploit, I ask him what's going on and why he's being in a spaz. I think I just walked up on a dude looking in the window at you. He took off as soon as I walked up. This is what he told me. This was, naturally, very unsettling, but after discussing it and considering the time of day, it was about 2 p.m., and the number of people out and about around the complex at the time, we came to the conclusion that it was just a curious neighbor or something passing through, or then just happened to take a quick glance. After that, we kind of forgot about it. If only that was the end. For the next couple of months, odd stuff happened here and there. Someone would knock on the door occasionally, then I would answer and no one was there. I'd find things in my apartment that I wasn't familiar with, or things like clothing items would vanish. I didn't really think twice about any of it until one night. My boyfriend and I were arguing around 1 or 2 in the morning, and we were being pretty loud. We were standing in the kitchen face to face. His back was into an open window and the blinds up halfway, and I was facing it. Amidst our arguing, I glanced behind him at the window, thinking I saw the reflection of my face in it. The window was open. It wasn't my face. There was a man with his face pressed almost against the window screen, watching us. Given the fact that we were arguing it was late, I thought for a moment it might have been a concerned neighbor walking up to the window to speak to us.
A main walkway for the complex was right on the other side of the window, so I spoke to him. "Hello? Can I help you?" I asked a little aggressively, thinking a neighbor was intruding on our privacy. He responded to this by staring, unwavered and cold, right at me. His face did not change expression. He did not blink or move. He looked right at me in a way I've never been looked at before or since. In this instant, I also realized that because of the window being level with the ground, the only way this man's face could be where it was if he was lying on the ground outside the apartment or crouched and contorted to look into the window. My heart sank. I buried my face in my boyfriend's chest and closed my eyes in fear. My boyfriend, up to this point, thought I was messing with him. When I buried my face in his chest, only then did he say, "Is there someone really at the window?" I whispered, "Yes." He felt my fear and took a moment before he turned around. By the time he did, the man was gone. It was at this point I started to think about all the little odd occurrences that I'd been experiencing, and I'd assumed the worst. I filed a police report with this description, and my brother loaded my apartment with weapons to protect me, or at least inform this peeping Tom that I was armed. After that night, my boyfriend and my brother were on high alert. There were a couple times when my brother came over that he saw a sketchy dude hanging around, and even one time he saw him out my window. He tried to follow him discreetly, but the guy took off running as soon as my brother stepped in his direction. The last night I had an experience with this man, I was sitting home alone on my sofa. My brother was at work at a restaurant about 2 blocks away. He had picked me up from work an hour earlier, and we sat on the sofa together. Then he kissed me and he left for work, locking the door behind him. After he left, I continued to sit on the couch on Reddit for a while, just in silence. After about an hour of me sitting there in silence, I heard a door creak open. It's a small apartment, so I could see the bedroom and bathroom doors from the couch. All I had to do was lean a little to the left. I assumed it was one of my cats coming out of the bathroom, so you can imagine my shock when I leaned over and to see that the door that's opening is to the water heater closet. I took to my right and I see both of my cats sound asleep on the couch. I look back to the door and it's still creaking open very slowly. It opens up just for me to see in it a set of fingers wrapped around the door, easing the door ever so gently and as quietly as possible. That was gonna be a no from me, dog. I ran barefooted out the door into the snow and ran to the street of my boyfriend's work. I called the cops when everyone was back to check out the apartment. Of course, he was gone. At that point, my boyfriend packed all of her stuff, went to stay with my parents, and 6 months later, moved 1,000 miles away from that town. And that was the end of it. I initially found this subreddit around that time, and I was trying to find other stories similar to mine, or people to talk to who had experienced something like this. I had intended to write my story here eventually, and I figured after this week's events, I had to do so. I live 1,000 miles from where all of this happened, so a part of me thinks there's no way this person could have found me. But last week, I heard a knock on the front door of my apartment. I was expecting a package, so it was a delivery driver and I didn't answer. I'd go get the package later. Then they knocked again, and again, and again. The third one made me feel uneasy, so I waited a good 20 minutes to go check the door. When I did, there was no package, no note, no nothing. Someone was just knocking. Although it made me uneasy, I didn't initially think back to my stressful experience back in my last town. Then, 2 days ago, I went out to get groceries. I have a little patio and I go out there in the mornings just to chill or check my plants a lot, and I've been known to leave it unlocked in the day on accident. I never thought it was a huge deal until I came home from the store 2 days ago and the deadbolt to my apartment was locked. The deadbolt that can only be locked from the inside of the apartment, period. I assumed someone robbed me, and I dumbly left my patio unlocked. So I called my sister. I called the current new boyfriend. I waited for people to be with me, and I went into my apartment through the sliding glass patio door. Nothing was out of place. Nothing of value was stolen. At this point, my heart sank. Nothing was touched. Nothing was stolen. Someone was inside my apartment just because they wanted to be inside my apartment. I told my boyfriend about my stalker, and he is not taking this lightly like my past boyfriend. I filed a police report. We checked for recording devices and cameras. He put up Nest cameras all over the place, and we are on high alert. I really, truly hope this is a coincidence, but if this man really followed me across multiple state lines, there is no one on this earth I am less interested in meeting. It was about 5 years ago. I was only 15 and I was on vacation with my parents and a few of their friends. These friends of theirs also had daughters, who was about 4 years younger than me. One day we went to the water park nearby. Our parents thought I was responsible enough considering my age and asked me to look after their friends' daughters. And of course, I agreed. So here we are, running around the park, trying different slides and queuing for various attractions. One of them was really fun, so we usually queued for that one. That's when things got very ugly. So we were just talking about random stuff when two men in their 50s started laughing at what we were saying. We hadn't even noticed they were behind us in the queue, so we just turned to look at them, and we gave them a smile, but then we just returned to our conversation. Then, I heard them clearly saying some ugly things louder than they needed so that we would hear them. They said things like, "Oh, those bikinis are really nice, and maybe we should ask him to come with us." For a moment, with the corner of my eye, I saw one of them touching himself over his costume, and they were getting closer to our backs. Too close. So I immediately saw a lot of red flags, and I just thought it was going to get worse and worse. My friend was clearly confused, since she was also younger. Then one of the men tapped me on the shoulder and asked if we were alone. I immediately replied, "No, my dad is here." So they scanned the area, wondering if my dad was actually there, watching the whole thing. I saw the occasion and immediately ran away, taking my friends by the hand and just going as far away as possible from those guys. About 5 minutes had passed. I was looking for my parents, but since I didn't have my phone with me, I couldn't find them. The place was very crowded,
and it was also in one of the biggest water parks in my region. We decided to just go to another attraction and ignore the whole thing. Well, what happened next left us all speechless. While queuing for the attraction, the guys from before found us and said, "Why are you girls running? We just wanted to have some fun with you." And I managed to reply to them, "We don't want to. Stay away," saying it louder so that other people in the queue would hear me as well. Some teenagers turned around my age and they noticed something was off. And they pretended to know us by saying, "Hey, where have you guys been? Do you want to go on the slide with us?" And I also went along with them, trying to get those guys away from us. They apparently gave up and left the queue. I immediately thanked those guys and explained to them the whole thing. And they said they would stick by us for the whole day in case those dudes were stalking us. At this point, the day is almost over, so we were heading to the changing rooms. Our newly made friends told us they would wait outside while we were changing. I was very grateful for their kindness, because after that, we never saw those old men again. Or so I thought. While I'm changing, I hear a man's voice coming from one of the stalls. It sounded like one of those men. I was thinking, it's not possible. I must be imagining it. But then I see him getting out of the stall with a child, who I assume is his daughter since she was calling him daddy. He was helping her get changed. For a second, our eyes met. He was very surprised since he hadn't noticed me, and he immediately dashed out of the changing room. I'm petrified and I'm scared to go out. My friends finished changing and we then caught up with the other guys, met our parents, and said goodbye to our saviors. To this day, I still think that if those boys hadn't helped us, we would have been constantly harassed and stalked by those dudes for the whole day. Or maybe even worse. So, to the two men who stalked me and my friend in the water park, let's not meet. This is my first ever Reddit post, which I'm writing on my phone, so I'm not sure about formatting. I'm posting here because I saw a video on this Reddit thread and I just wanted to share my experience of who I never want to meet again. This might be rather boring. It's definitely not the high stakes kind of thriller stories I've been reading on here, but it did creep me out when I was young. Also, it might be long because I'm usually quite detailed. I got my first job at 15, working in the local convenience store for under-table paychecks until I turned 16 and they could, legally hire me. They needed staff they could underpay and I needed money to support my family. Plus the store was literally 10 minutes from my house, so I could go home for lunch or go jogging in the field next to the store. I'm a very friendly person and I love to make conversation because it helped the day go by faster. One morning, a guy, maybe late 20s and 30s, came into the store to receive a click and collect package, and the system was being really slow, so I asked him about his previous evening, just to make small talk. It had been Guy Fawkes night, so it was my topic of conversation with everyone that day. He didn't appear to want to talk much, and so I overcompensated with my own talking, so there wasn't any awkward silence while the parcels were scanning. And I told him about how my dog hates fireworks, so I stay inside with him. He asked me when the store closes. So many people at the store ask this, and so that's why I didn't find it weird. I told him the store closes at 3 p.m. because it's a Sunday. He left with his parcels and I didn't really think of him at all. I took my break at 12 and went on my usual laps around the field after getting rid of my work uniform. And it was fairly cold, so nobody else was on the field.
I'm on the opposite side and I look to my left because I'm dramatically singing along the Hamilton in my headphones on the children's swing set in the park. So, because it's pretty cold and now I'm pretty embarrassed that I'm being watched, I finish my jog there and finish my break inside the stockroom just drinking tea. Again, this didn't faze me because there's always weirdos hanging around my area, and many of them I knew because of how close the community is. I finished my shift at 4 p.m. after cleaning and restocking for the next day, and I was let out through the back exit car park that shared with the local pub. Funnily enough, I have many childhood memories before it closed down due to my parents and I living on this council estate my whole life. Some guy was sitting on the wall there with his coat hood pulled up. This is slightly strange because nothing around the area was open and hadn't been for at least an hour, especially not the pub. But I was 15 and I'd taken the same walk down to the main road every single shift without any issues. I put my headphones in with a slight pinch of anxiety because as soon as I moved past this guy, I see him jump up from the wall from the corner of my eye. I don't put the music on. I just listen to his footsteps follow me until he is next to me, gesturing for me to remove my headphones. As you probably guessed, it's the same guy from the morning shift. I'm really confused at this point because it's the first time I've seen him in my local store. We have a lot of regulars, and I would even know most of them by address because we saved everyone's newspapers. But I'd never seen him before, only to encounter him twice in one day. I removed my headphones and asked what he wanted. He asked for the time. I assumed because of the council estate I lived on that he was perhaps going to mug me. It's happened before. So I told him it's around 4 p.m. without taking my phone out. He then proceeds to pretend he only just recognizes me from the store and tells me he thought I finished at 3 p.m. I'd watched enough true crime to be guessing he had waited for me to finish my shift for an hour. I was having a mild panic attack by this point because it was a lazy cold Sunday, so nobody was around and I wasn't yet at the main road. So I continued to talk to him while he questioned me about how long I've worked at the store. I know it's stupid to engage, but he was keeping my pace. And the main road was only down the street where I thought our paths would diverge by then. He asked me if I worked there all the time, and in an effort to dissuade him from trying to hit on me, I told him I was still studying, although I wouldn't tell him at which institution. Me being a minor didn't seem to deter him. Mind you, at the age I am now, being 20, I only just look like I'm 15. Like I said, he was undeterred and tried asking me for my number, in which I told him that I didn't have a phone. It was an obvious lie because I had my headphone plugged into the phone and I was tightly gripping it in my pocket. He brought this up and I told him, that it's a shared phone and that I don't have my own. Despite this being an obvious lie, he continued. I was on the main road now, but he had not stopped talking, and I was on my quickest way home. The path I usually took was through a dark wooded area and then a shady parking lot. I decided to go the longer way to keep on a public road so he wouldn't know where my home was located. He asked me for my Facebook and I desperately wanted to get away from him at this point. So I thought if I gave him my Facebook and then changed the name as soon as I had the chance, he wouldn't be able to find me. I don't know why I didn't just give him a fake name. I was young and stupid and honestly I was just scared. No cars had passed by yet and he was still talking to me. After this I asked him which way that he lived and he told me only a short while up ahead. Then he asked me if I was interested in coming along with him.
I said I live in this other direction and I would say goodbye now, but that we could speak later. Again, I know I'm an idiot, but I thought if he thought that I was interested in speaking to him, he would leave me alone. And because of my experience talking to people in my job, this luckily came off very casually and truthfully. It worked, and I crossed the road, and as soon as I was out of sight, I legged it back down the side of the road and got home. When home, I went to change my name, but found that he had already messaged me. Although I hadn't told him my middle name that was a part of my Facebook, which he brought up to me in his first message. I messaged him back explaining I had no interest in him and instantly blocked his account. I felt so stupid for even letting him have my real name that I couldn't bring myself to tell my parents. Instead, I would ask my brother to meet me at the store at the end of my shifts. It was only Sundays I finished an hour late because I wanted them to help me pick out ingredients for dinner those nights. My first shift went back. He was waiting outside in the same area, but my brother was with me, and we went out the front way so I could see him waiting there, but didn't have to walk past him. After this, I decided I couldn't keep getting escorts home and told my work I needed to leave at different times in case he followed me. They wanted to tell the authorities, but I refused because it was a relatively small thing and I was working illegally too, and I didn't want to get them in trouble. I finally told my parents, and they told a few people in the neighborhood to be wary. I started getting the bus home from school because I was worried he had my Facebook and now knew where I went to school. The next time I saw him, he came into the store again to collect parcels. I told my manager next to me and she served him, while also telling him that they would call someone if he continued to harass me. I was scared about all the information he had now from my Facebook because I was a young kid. My privacy settings were crap and I held my county, my school, hundreds of pictures of my friends in my neighborhood and at school, all of them tagged. Well, luckily, nothing more happened after that. I saw him once on the bus with my mother a year later, and again while I was in college at a shopping center. I'd quit my job a little while after all this to work somewhere legally when I finally turned 16 to earn more money, and I live in a different city now. He doesn't scare me anymore, but I definitely am more private about my life on social media. Everything is private, and I don't provide my real information for certain sites anyway. Well, this is just a little story about my experience having excuse the pun, a minor stalker. Obviously, I still blame myself for being dumb and having all my private information out there. But I thought it would be interesting to post. So, dear middle-aged stalker, let's not meet again. When I was around 14, I had an appointment at the bank with my mom. She wanted to set up an account for me. So one afternoon we were downtown in the bank building, and I remember feeling really bored by the whole process. It was that kind of dry financial stuff, and I would rather have stayed home to play games or something. My mom noticed after a few minutes and then confirmed with the bank employee that I was actually just needing us to sign some papers in the end. And in the end, I really didn't need to be there. Since we were already downtown, my mom gave me a bit of money and told me to go buy myself some new clothes. I usually don't care about my appearance back then, so I usually kind of look sloppish. The whole thing would still take about an hour or so,
it would be fine if I was back by then. I went to the mall first, since I knew there were some cheap stores in there. While I was browsing some clothes, I noticed an older man, around 60, I guess. There wasn't anything creepy or remarkable about him. I just thought it was weird seeing someone that age in a store predominantly for young people. I then proceeded to see this guy a few more times in the mall. At first I shrugged it off, but after a while, I noticed he was actually following me. I even tried it out and made a little game out of it. Soon it became clear he was always near the same stores that I entered. Naive boy. Besides from the fact he was following me, there was nothing weird about this old man, so I couldn't even imagine what his actual intentions were. I just thought he was some bored geezer who likes to play shop detective in his free time, and maybe he mistakenly thought I had stolen something back in the first store. Yeah, I was pretty dumb back then. When I left the mall, the guy still followed me through the city. I wasn't scared, just slightly irritated. But I chose to ignore him for the time being and just took care of the shopping. When I entered the next door, he didn't seem to follow me at first. But then while I was choosing some clothes in the upper level, I noticed him again, a few shelves away. I went to the changing room. God, how can someone be that dumb? I went there to try out some stuff and while I was doing that, I heard slow steps, very close to the booth I was in. I knew it was him and I thought it was kinda creepy, but I still didn't get what was going on. He didn't linger there too long, but he still remained at the store, which I left after not buying anything. Now, at this point, I kinda had enough. After leaving the building, I immediately hid behind one of the pillars which led to the entrance. I saw him come out of the store and look for me, but he didn't notice me and went away. I thought I was rid of him. The problem was, the bank building where my mother waited was in the same direction that the stalker went. I decided it would be safer to wait a bit, so I went into the McDonald's opposite of the clothing store, and I bought myself a burger. And then, while I was eating it outside of the McDonald's, the guy actually came back. At this point, I had had enough. It was obvious that the guy wasn't any kind of shop detective. So what the hell did he want? I was really annoyed at him for following me and creeping me out. But I was also so kind. What was he doing? What I did next. Please never do this. I would not have done this had I known what he wanted. I lured him away. At the end of the street, there was this nice breakfast place which closes in the afternoon. So at that time, there weren't any people in the benches or in the chairs in the front of the place. I sat down on one of the benches and nervously played around with my MP3 player. I knew what I was doing was dangerous, but my curiosity just got the better of me. And as weird as it sounds, it was also kind of a thrill, to be honest. It didn't take long for the stalker to sit down on the bench opposite of mine. He didn't introduce himself or ask for my name. He just started some small talk and told me he's not from here, but I looked like I could show him more. This still felt really weird to me, but I was kind of relieved as he didn't come off as a bad guy. I told him politely I didn't have time, since I needed to go back to my mom soon. He asked if I had enough time to show him just one place. The park. I asked him which park did he want to go to. Buddy replied, "Any park will do." Something started feeling a little off here. Luckily, there was one nearby, pretty easy to find. So I just started explaining directions to him. Buddy interrupted me, saying he wanted me to take him there personally. I agreed, and I started to lead the way. But as we were walking, neither of us said anything. I slowly realized what was happening. I froze in place. He turned back and looked at me, asking if I didn't want to go with him to the park anymore. I panicked and screamed, "No!" which caused a lot of people to turn towards us. This was happening in a busy area. He just said, "Bye," and left, while I immediately ran back to the bank to tell my mom what happened. She was still talking to the employee from before. She was present when I told my mom. I was so shook and I didn't care. My mom got angry and told me if anyone ever tried that again, I should, put up a fight, which is really questionable advice to give a child, but that's kind of how my mom shows her support. There's a lot of stuff I left out, but I feel like this is long enough. Thank you if you took the time to read this.
Oh my goodness, you made it. Thank you so much if you made it to the end of this video. And also sorry for having to listen to my voice for that long. Again, make sure you subscribe for way more in the future, because we're going to try to keep this going. Thanks to everyone who let me read their stories. You are the real heroes here. And to my biggest supporters, my two friends who consistently listen to these videos whenever I put them out. Their support and their feedback to me is extremely important, and I thank them for all of their support. I keep going because of it. Enough of that. I hope you have a great day. I hope you check out some of the creepypastas as well. And that is it. Bye.